Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm talking softly because everyone's still in bed here. It's been a long time since I've done a book review, and I've been reading lots of different things. But I'm going to do a review of a completely different kind now. And believe it or not, this is actually bird related. So this book, well, my review is going to be, what I'm about to say is bird related. Three Crooked Kings by Matthew Condon, the explosive true story. So this is a pretty well-known book here in Queensland. It details, it's part of a series Condon did. It details police corruption that eventually led up to the Fitzgerald inquiry. This stops in the mid-70s, so there is a sequel. But why am I reading this? Because most of you probably may not be aware, I write novels, and I'm writing a sequel to one of my books now, and it's set just in the post-Fitzgerald era. It follows a policewoman in 1993. So I read this book just as background for more information about the police corruption and the crime scene leading up to the Fitzgerald inquiry, because that's still very much a part of the book series that I'm writing. But what's this got to do with birds? So this is a bird channel, so what's this got to do with birds? And this was amazing. I'm going to read you out a bit. And this is just lovely. I was really surprised when this was in here. So, so I'll just read out a paragraph or two. So Ray Whitrod, who one of the few good eggs in this book, and I've got to tell you, this is literally about the most depressing book I've ever read in my life. I couldn't wait to finish it just so I'd stop reading it, because it's just horrible, the bloody stuff that goes on in here. But there's one really lovely passage. Now, Ray Whitrod, I can't remember the time frame here. I think it's the early 60s. It might have been late 50s. Anyway, he, I don't know if he was the main person setting up the Australian Federal Police, but he was working on a federal level as a policeman at that stage, and he was very much involved in setting up federal police before he became the Commissioner of Police in Queensland. Tried to do something about the corruption, but anyway, so this is back before he was in Queensland. So I'll just read out this bit, and it's really good. So it's about the royal visit with and do you know what, I've just got a message on my phone. That stupid trumpet of the Patriots Party keeps texting me. Like, honestly, nothing could make you want to vote for someone less than unsolicited text messages that you can't even block. I don't know how they do it so they can't block it. You can't block it, but one just popped up. So, anyway. Yeah, and look, and when I say stupid party, I think most of the policies are stupid. I'm sure they've got some good ones in there. Everyone's a mixture of good and bad, blah, blah, blah. But I just, I'm not going to vote for you. Stop texting me, okay? Anyway, the election's a couple of weeks away. So the young Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were visiting Australia. I don't know if I could probably find the year if I looked a bit deeper. I think it's the late 50s. So this is the bird part. Meanwhile, Ray Whitrod was getting close to the royal couple. I accepted personal responsibility for the safety of the royals and went everywhere with them, he recalled in his memoir. The prince discovered that I shared his interest in wading birds, and whenever an opportunity presented itself, he would get me to drive him to some isolated spot to photograph Australian migratory waders. This is so cool. Between official engagements, Whitrod escorted Prince Philip in his second-hand Holden to various birdwatching spots around Canberra, and even took him mist netting at Lake George, north of the city. Mist netting involved setting up almost invisible nets for before dawn, trapping birds as they foraged for dawn food and tagging them. He enjoyed that very much, Whitrod later recalled. Then it just goes on about royal visit stuff, and finally, so they're talking about Whitrod here. He would accompany the royals on to Perth, and at a farewell function on the Royal Yacht Britannia, Prince Philip would present Whitrod with his book Birds of the Antarctic. It was inscribed to Ray Whitrod with many thanks, PP, Prince Philip. Now, this book that is full of so much doom and gloom, that was just a really nice little positive thing. And first of all, I had no idea that Prince Philip was into birds. I think I vaguely knew he was into conservation. I mean, about all I knew about him was that he was famous for dropping clangers in the most poorly timed social situation, which is a skill everyone should obviously have. And a friend of mine got to shake his hand when he got the Gold Duke of Edinburgh's Award, and that's about all I know about him. And the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which I did as well, only did the silver. That's a fantastic thing, and I'm sure it's still going, even though Prince Philip's no longer with us. But yeah, and Ray Whitrod as well, into birds. And, you know, I think after COVID, everyone's realising how wonderful bird watching can be for your mental health and just as an escape. And it was just kind of nice and refreshing seeing those two men, which would have been under enormous pressure in their respective lives, getting some joy out of doing that, and even going as far as to participate in mist netting. So anyway, so I just wanted to share that. Now, if you want a review of this book, stay on, because I think I'm going to review it anyway, but obviously it's not really going to be bird related from here on. But if you are interested, stay in here. So, look, I'd never read a book like this before. So now moving into my general review of this book. It's what I call kind of shaggy, okay? So it's true. What he's documenting is true. He's chronicling all of this crime, which it starts, I think, in the 40s. And interestingly, like everyone thinks of the National Party with the corruption here, but the Labor Party was full of it as well back then. I think it just happened that the Nationals were the one holding the bag by the time it finally hit the public. And obviously they're to blame with what happened. They had enough time to clean it up and didn't, but it was by no means restricted to the National Party. It had just been going for decades in Queensland. I mean, this starts in the 40s. I'm sure it could have even been traced back before then, but successive governments of, you know, different kinds were responsible. Obviously, there's some good people in there. And that's one of the nice things in this book, seeing some of the, or sad though, seeing them struggle and not quite succeed in what they were trying to achieve. But I mean, I guess if I read the next one, then ultimately we'd see it would come to a head with the Fitzgerald inquiry. But anyway, so it's a shaggy story, right? So it has a huge amount of characters, and it's almost written like in vignettes, tiny little chapters that are like scenes, 2 or 3 pages long even. You could make a great long-form TV series out of this, like, you know, what Netflix does now. And all these characters would kind of be brought together, and you could have that scope to have the extra characters in it. If this was, so it's kind of a narrative, but because it's factual, it's important that he does keep all that extra detail and characters in there, because it's just recording what happened, and that's very important to do. But it makes for a very interesting read, and occasionally, you know, there were some names mentioned, and I couldn't remember who they were because it's just so many names. And I think as the book goes on, Condon's a bit aware of that, and he does put little reminders in, and then he kind of says, you know, foreshadows what's to come to kind of keep you focused and that as well. But yeah, I hadn't read a book like this. The subject matter is so bloody depressing, like police on the take, basically offering protection rackets, and then they were criminals as well, but they would use the law to squash their competition. I mean, they were also solving crimes at the same time too. A lot of them were good at their police work, you know, apart from the corruption part of it, which is no excuse, of course, but it's just pretty intriguing, and it's just sad. I mean, you know, and people who were killed, murdered, just because suddenly they became a threat instead of an asset for various reasons. Yeah, really sad story of a woman called Shirley Brifman. I won't say, I won't give much detail. It's worth reading, but if you're interested in that kind of stuff, if you're not, like, it'd probably be a hard read. It gave me a lot of background and context. It gave me the kind of information I needed about how they did things and how it worked, but it's just a sad story. You know, you've got this one life and you've got to try and do something good with it, and this is what some of these people did. And it's no excuse that they came from tough backgrounds and society was poorer then, because plenty of people have come from tough backgrounds and poor upbringings and gone on to do really good things. You don't have to revert to this kind of stuff. So I don't know, I was very pleased when I finished reading it. And I've got a few other books I've bought for context, but I don't think I'm going to read them because they're just depressing, and I think I've learned enough what I need to in terms of my own book. Yeah, there's a few editorial things, editing things which I found interesting. There was, I mean, you could see the book was obviously written in batches, and I read it probably in the space of about 5 days or something, probably pretty consistently through. So, you know, there's one bit where he, I don't think it was Whitrock, I think it was Bischoff, a former police commissioner who was corrupt. But anyway, there's one section where they introduce him like they haven't just been talking about him for the last 50 pages, which, you know, you'd pick up as you read it through in one go, but you may not otherwise. And then there's a few instances where they talk about dollars, but I'm sure they must have been pounds because it was before we got decimal currency. But anyway, a few little editing things like that I noticed, which is nothing major. This is just a huge accomplishment. The volume of research that must have gone into this is insane. And then he was in the position of having, this is Condon, in the position of having to work out, well, what's legitimate, what isn't, who's lying, who's telling the truth, what evidence do I have, what evidence don't I have. And it is fairly balanced. He'll talk about, he'll say what he thinks happened, and then he'll say, well, so-and-so said this never happened. So that's quite a decent thing to do, I think. So when you're talking about real people, if they, who are criminals, some of which were police, if they deny something happened, but you think they're lying or they've forgot it or whatever, it's still the decent thing to do, is just to acknowledge their position on it, even if you've presented the case that it did happen, which is how he's done this book. So, yeah, so anyway, there is a sequel, which would be interesting to read because, you know, knowing Brisbane, and I mean, this happens throughout Queensland, and he refers to different places, knowing a lot of the places he refers to, and even some of the, like, there's a couple of streets he mentioned in Brisbane that I knew, you know, and then you start to hear names that you've heard of, and that'd be more so in the stuff in the 80s leading up to the Fitzgerald inquiry. So it'd be interesting from that point of view to read the next one, but I don't think I will. It's just too depressing. But anyway, so the bird bit was nice in there. It's about the nicest thing in the book, actually. The rest of it's just pretty horrible. But it was a very significant thing to have written this book, and I think Matthew Condon's done a fantastic job. So it's a great service to the state to have done this, actually. So anyway, if you're interested, there it is. So this is probably my only non-bird book related book review here. So hope you're all doing well, everyone, and I'll catch you. Okay, see you then. Bye.